In one afternoon off Cartagena, 400 pirates were cut down on a Spanish galleon. She sailed on untouched. This is how a single ship humiliated the most ruthless men who ever sailed under the black flag. Picture her at dusk, a silhouette 3 stories tall, riding low on a Mercury sea, lanterns swinging like eyes. The myth tells you pirates plundered her at will. The ledger tells you the opposite, again and again. For every galleon taken, a dozen pirate crews were shredded against her hull. Most who chased her died chasing. To understand why, you must understand the age that built her, the brutal Golden Age of Piracy itself. Roughly 1650 to 1730. 80 years of blood-soaked ports. Tortuga, Port Royal, Nassau under the black flag. Behind that violence stood a river of silver. Spain had bled 2 entire continents dry to fill her holds. From the mines of Potosi, from the mints of Mexico City, the metal moved by mule and by hull. It crossed the Pacific from Manila to Acapulco, then crawled overland to Veracruz and Portobello, ever onward. Then it sailed east for Seville in convoys called the flotas. Empires floated on those groaning oaken hulls. Palaces in Madrid, armies in Flanders, cathedrals in Rome, all stood because one galleon reached port safely. One prize equaled a fortune, not a captain's fortune, a nation's. A war chest wrapped in salt-stained oak. A single vessel could carry 2 million pieces of eight, enough to fund a war or buy noble titles. That is what the black flag was hunting. Not coins on a beach, a mobile treasury under full sail. Wrapped in oak, bristling with cannon, guarded by Spanish soldiers. But what made her untakeable was her design. Here lies the paradox that shaped a century of piracy. The prize was fat, the captures were thin. Historians counting Spanish records find that between 1600 and 1750, over 500 transatlantic galleon voyages sailed. Fewer than a dozen were taken by pirate action on the open sea. Storms took more, reefs took more, bad navigation took more. Yet the pirates kept coming. Some crews stocked the flotas for years, unwavering. Henry Morgan planned his campaigns for seasons. George Anson circled the globe for 4 years, chasing one ship.
Why? Because the reward, if it ever came, rewrote your life entirely. Fortune favored the ruthless, always. A pirate might spend a lifetime in the trade and never see a single peso of Spanish silver. Or he might see, in one afternoon, enough silver to retire a landed gentleman in the Carolinas. The myth insists she was easy meat. The archives insist she was a fortress, brutal and unyielding. To understand the hunt, you must first step aboard her decks, where the truth waits in shadow. She began as timber. Cuban mahogany for the frames, Philippine teak for the beams, Basque oak for the planks. All fastened with iron and treacle black pitch. Her hull was not built, it was grown, layered, laminated against shot. 2 feet of hardwood at the waterline in some ships. A 12-pound cannonball would splinter against her, not penetrate. She rose from that hull like a cliff. Fore and aft she carried castles, literal wooden towers, 4 decks. Riddled with gun ports and loopholes, her defenders looked down on any border like besiegers upon a ditch. She carried 40 to 70 heavy cannon in tiers, throwing broadsides that cracked a smaller ship in half. Above them stood swivel guns on the rails, small brass pieces loaded with grapeshot and nails and broken glass. Boarding nets of tarred rope rigged across her waist trapped any pirate leaping her rail in a shooting web. In her tops, musketeers waited with matchlocks and flintlocks, picking men off enemy decks like crows from a fence. Below decks, she carried a small city, 200 sailors, 100 Spanish soldiers, veterans of Flanders and Naples, gunners, carpenters, a priest or 2. A silver clerk of the Casa de Contratación tracked every ingot and coin. She was not a merchantman with guns. She was a floating garrison escorting a bank vault across the Atlantic. Yet even fortresses have seams, and pirates, patient beneath the black flag, learned every one of them.
The hunt was a craft. It began not at sea, but in the taverns of every blood-soaked port. Nassau, Tortuga, Port Royal, later Charlestown, every lawless harbor whispered secrets to those who paid well. A cabin boy paid off in Havana, a drunk sailor in Cartagena, a corrupt customs clerk in Portobello. From them, a pirate captain learned when the flota would sail, how many hulls, which admiral commanded.
Then came the shadowing. Pirate sloops, small, fast, drawing only 6 feet of water, trailed treasure fleets for weeks. They stayed on the horizon, sails dropped at dusk, sails raised at dawn, waiting for one thing: a straggler. Weather did their work. A squall in the Bahamas Channel, a night of fog off Cape San Antonio. A torn topsail, and the galleon that fell behind by a few miles was suddenly alone and vulnerable. A sloop with 60 men and 8 guns could try her. The pirates fought the way wolves fight bison, not head-on. They cut her rigging, they shot her helmsman, they raked her decks with grape-shot. They came at her stern, where her broadside could not reach, hoping to board before her soldiers formed. Speed against weight, numbers against discipline. It worked, sometimes. More often, the galleon rolled out her lower gunports. 40 24-pounders spoke at once, and the sloop was matchwood and screaming men adrift in a Red Sea.
But the deeper you looked into these hunts, the stranger and darker the truth beneath the black flag became. Because the galleon's most terrible enemy was never the pirate. It was herself. She was overloaded, always overloaded. Merchants bribed clerks to cram one more chest, one more bale of cochineal, one more crate of indigo below. Her waterline crept steadily upward. Her lower gunports drowned in heavy seas. Her rudder groaned under crushing weight. She rotted, and rotted always. Tropical worms, Veteredo, the shipworm, devoured the broken planks from below without pause. A galleon 2 years out of Manila might have a hull as porous as bread. Hurricanes hunted her. Spanish colonial archives record 17 galleons lost to a single autumn hurricane off Florida, September 1559 alone. Her crews were often undermanned. Yellow fever thinned them. Deserters slipped away at every foreign port along the route.
Her gunners were farmers pressed at Cadiz, men who fired a cannon only the day they died beside one. Her captains were sometimes courtiers who had bought their commissions and could not properly read a sea chart. Corruption chewed her from within. The floating fortress was often defeated by its own weight and its own rot, which is exactly what one patient pirate crew, sailing under the black flag, waited long years to exploit. Consider the case files. 1668. Henry Morgan understood the paradox better than any man of his age. He did not chase the galleons at sea. He walked around them, landing at Portobello on Panama's isthmus. He took the port itself, seizing the silver in its warehouses before it was ever loaded aboard a hull. He held the city a month and sailed away with 250,000 pieces of eight. The galleons in the harbor never fired a shot. Morgan's lesson was simple, brutal, and forever remembered. If you cannot take the fortress at sea, take her before she sails. Fortune favored the ruthless. 1708. Charles Wager, a Royal Navy Commodore, intercepted the Spanish treasure fleet off Cartagena at dusk. His squadron caught the flagship San Jose in a night action. A shot found her powder magazine. 600 men and 11 million pesos went down aboard the San Jose in a single roar of flame. Wager got nothing. The sea got everything. 1743. George Jensen pursued his prize under Fortune's black flag. 4 years into a circumnavigation that had killed most of his crew to scurvy and storm, he pressed on. He sighted the Manila galleon Covadonga off Cape Espiritu Santo. He had waited a lifetime for this moment. His men had waited longer. Grape shot swept her decks. Yard-long splinters cut men in half where they stood. The boarding actions were beyond description. Decks ran slick with blood, so thick men lost their footing. Quarter rarely given. Spanish infantry fought with the fatalism of men who knew surrender meant the noose in Kingston. The pirates fought with the fury of men who had chased this moment for years. Aboard, on deck, ruthless. One capture reshaped an empire's balance in a single blood-soaked afternoon. This is the truth behind the myth. Cape Espiritu Santo, 20th of June, 1743. Anson's Centurion, 60 guns, worm-eaten, crew reduced to 200 feet. Against her, Nuestra Señora de Covadonga, 34 guns reinforced, 550 men aboard, sailing home from Acapulco with silver. On paper, the Spaniard should have won. In practice, Anson's gunners had drilled every day of that 4-year voyage. They fired 3 broadsides for every 2 Spanish. They fired lower into the hull with the calm of doomed men. The Covadonga's decks became a slaughterhouse. Her captain fell wounded, her helm shattered. After 90 minutes, she struck her colors. When Anson's men boarded, they counted the dead. 67 Spaniards killed, 84 wounded. 3 British killed, 17 wounded. In her holds, 1,300,000 pieces of eight, plus 35,000 ounces of raw silver. The lifetime hunt had finally paid. But the lesson was not weakness. The fortress fell to discipline, not to luck. Anson had not stumbled onto her. He had trained for her every day for 4 years, exposing the galleon's truth. She was never just a ship. She was a symbol carrying the wealth of 2 hemispheres in her belly. And she carried the ambition of an empire on her masts. When she reached Seville, church bells rang. When she failed to reach Seville, banks in Genoa collapsed, armies in Flanders went unpaid, dynasties tottered. The pop culture image of piracy, parrot, peg-leg, treasure chest on a beach, is a 19th century invention. Stitched together from Robert Louis Stevenson and cheap engravings, the archival record is colder and far darker. Most pirates died young, penniless, of dysentery or hemp. Most galleons reached port. Plunder was never easy. The truth behind the myth is that it was a lottery paid for in years and in corpses. And yet she still haunts the storytelling, the largest thing that moved on the sea in her age. She haunts it because she was the container of empire. To take her was to seize history itself. Once in a generation, some men like Anson or Morgan did exactly that, and the world tilted slightly. And the next hull we hunt sank even richer than hers. The story does not end at Espiritu Santo. There is another wreck, another galleon, richer than the Covadonga, whose gold still lies scattered on the seabed. Her fate? A hurricane, a betrayal, a treasure so vast that 4 nations still argue over its bones. If you want to know how she met her end, the next video is already waiting on the channel. Join the crew, set sail with us, hit subscribe before the next voyage.